Okay, does the attack from Iran on American targets have any biblical significance? And then we'll just talk about what's going on from that.
Yeah, well, anything that's going on with Iran in the Middle East, as far as Iran, Israel, and all of this stuff's interconnected. There's a passage in Ezekiel chapter 38 that talks about an attack that's going to come down on Israel, and it talks about the main players in the attack, and it says this. This is Ezekiel 38, verse 2. Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say thus, says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. That group of people, those are families, and that group of people in ancient times was called the Scythians, and during a lot of the understanding that we have of who these people groups are come from ancient historians. One of them is Josephus. Josephus made it clear that this is a group of people that are called the Scythians. We know from history that the Scythians were in the steppes of Russia, and so this is talking about Russia. And people try to mess around with that, but that's what it is. It's the best identification of that group of people. So you have Russia there. It says, verse 4, I'll turn you around, put hooks into your jaws, and lead you out with all your army, horses and horsemen, all splendidly clothed, a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords. Then it gives this list of nations: Persia, and that is Iran. Ethiopia, that's Ethiopia. Actually, Ethiopia combined with Sudan and that area. Libya, in the old King James Version, that's Cush. And Libya is what we still call Libya to this day. Or with them, all of them with shield and helmet. Gomer and all its troops, the house of Togarmah from the far north and all its troops. Gomer most likely is a group of people that are somewhere in Eastern Europe. That's a hard one to pin down. Togarmah, on the other hand, is Turkey. And the Turks still call themselves the sons of Togarmah. And so the three main players that you have in that passage as far as world movers that we have today are Russia, Iran, and Turkey. And they have military alliances right now. They are all those nations specifically are right now in Syria, fighting conflicts in Syria, which is just north of Israel. And this attack comes from those three combined nations, along with Gomer and Ethiopia and Libya. So Ethiopia and Libya would be coming from North Africa, and Gomer, it looks like, may even be the Balkans. There's a possibility there. In any case, that is a major attack that takes place, and in that attack, the armies that attack Israel are destroyed, and the Bible says that their homelands are destroyed by fire and brimstone, and that the coastlands are hit with fire and brimstone, and that's a Jewish idiom for Gentile countries. And so Gentile countries, specifically the countries that send these armies and the armies themselves, are all destroyed. And so again, when you're talking about the players there, the main players as far as geopolitical, the geopolitical situation that we have right now are Russia, Iran, and Turkey, with the other ones outliers basically. And so anything that Iran's doing in the Middle East is interesting. The other thing that's interesting about this is because of the attacks on Soleimani, the Iraqis have voted on a non-binding resolution, which means that it doesn't mean anything, but they voted to get the United States out of Iraq. And that's one of the things that the Bible teaches also in this chapter, is that when Israel is attacked by these nations, they're alone, and there's nobody with them. There's a what amounts to a diplomatic protest in the passage from certain nations, but Israel is alone in this, and God uses it to show the people of Israel that he's still active and he still cares about them and he's still protecting them. So.
All right, I'm going to ask this question from David and then get back to just one thing you're talking about in America. But he posted on here, reading in Ezekiel 38, I've always understood the Gog-Magog term as being the land of Russia, referring to the verse 6 reference of the North Quaders, as well as verse 15. And also hearing respected end-time prophecy experts state with certainty that this is referring to Russia. But when you actually look at what is actually true north of Jerusalem, Moscow is not even close. True north from the capital of Jerusalem to the North Pole actually takes you through the heart of Ankara, the capital of Turkey. What are your thoughts? Now, I pulled this up in my office. I'm not really sure what David's talking about because straight north of Israel is Ankara, but straight north of that is Moscow.
Right.
Like almost a straight line.
Yeah,
So.
they're all in the same time zone.
Right.
Yeah, and so, you just need to go back to a globe because it's one of the things that I teach all the time is that Moscow's straight north of Israel.
Right.
And Moscow isn't even necessarily the issue itself. You have some things in this passage when it says the prince of Rosh, Meshech, and Tubal. Rosh may be where we get the term Russian. Meshech may have something to do with the term from Moscow, and Tubal. There's a city in Russia that's called Tobolsk, and so there may be some connection there as far as the language goes and a memory of the families that settled those areas. These are the names of families, basically in the Bible. And so when you're looking at Togarmah, if you look down in verse 6, it says the house of Togarmah from the far north and all its troops. And so you're right in that Turkey is directly north of Israel, and it's mentioned in the passage. And so, again, the house of Togarmah or the sons of Togarmah are a reference to Turkey. So it would be both of them.
Okay, so just real quick, back on the Iran thing. You have obviously America, which is where we live, involved in this situation. Then you have Bible prophecy. And one thing with Bible prophecy is that we're not there.
Right.
So do you think that this is a situation where it could be leading to something else? Because on the news, it kind of seemed that Trump isn't going to take it somewhere. And I don't know if he's being political about that or whatever. But what's more interesting to me is what we have going on here and just watching parties attack this issue. Now, it's cool because all those guys that you just read are all on Frontline News.
Right.
And then we're having our own thing, and we're not there.
Right. Jesus said a house divided cannot stand, and that's what we've got.
Right.
We've got a house divided. When you look at the reactions to to Trump taking out Soleimani, back in April, this guy was put on the. I've got some of this information because I'm preparing for the prophecy update, and the State Department put out a statement on this guy back in April, talking about the fact that he's directly involved with killing over 600 of our soldiers and Marines. And that's just killing. That's not talking about the maiming that was going on. This guy had 3 bases that he set up for training Muslim militias in Iraq. And so Iran is one country, Iraq's another. Sometimes people get those confused. And so he is a major exporter of terrorism. He actually, when I read an article by George Petraeus, who was the commander of forces in Iraq, back during the Bush years. And one of the things that he said was that when he was trying to deal with mullahs in Iran, the Iranian parliament and that kind of thing, he got a direct letter from this guy saying that he was in charge of Syria, he was in charge of Iraq, he was in charge of, basically Hezbollah. He was in charge of all these things. And he was letting Petraeus know that he was dealing with the wrong guys. And that if he wanted to get anything done, that he needed to be talking to him. And so this guy is, the guy's a terrorist. And, it's like he can be the second in command in Iran and still be a terrorist. And that's the deal with this guy. And so when Trump took out this guy, I think that the political discourse in our country is so divisive that these guys who are on the left cannot do anything that looks like agreement with Trump. And, again, house divided cannot stand. And so it doesn't, one of the things that I'm looking at with this situation is at some point, it's not going to matter that we have the most military equipment on the, on the planet, that we're the top superpower. It's not going to matter. It used to be that politicians, quit the politics, at the borders, basically, at the, where it started getting into foreign affairs, that kind of thing. That we had a united front. These people do not care to be united, and so, this is an issue. Some of the things that are being spouted. It's like when you look at specifically leftists' attitudes towards people who they call the right. I hate the whole left-right thing because I'm not right-wing. I'm normal. It's like the standards for most of the people in the United States have not changed since the 60s. And what the press has a tendency to do is take people who have not moved. They haven't moved on what a family is, haven't moved on who your children are, haven't moved on the whole issue of marriage, haven't moved on, on a number of issues that have to do with morality, just have not moved. And they've always been mainstream, and then inflict their leftist mentality on the culture, and then decide that the people who literally have not moved are not mainstream, that they're right wing. And so what's happened is parties have moved in, specifically the Democrat Party. I'm done trying to be equal on these guys. These guys are messed up. The Democrat Party has moved so far to the left that they're literally leaving their own people. They've been doing it for decades, and now they're just cementing the whole thing. And this ideology gets put into the educational system, and you have kids who grow up with this nonsense, and they think that it's, again, mainstream, that this is how the world thinks. And again, I just believe it's a completely messed up situation. And so when you get a country that is divided right down the middle and is literally calling each other evil and wicked and having that kind of attitude, you're going to get yourself a situation where you're going to have chaos. And many of these people, it's exactly what they want. They want anarchy. They want to pull it down and burn it up. And I think it's one of the things that actually may come to pass. It may be one of the, actually, it's probably the number one thing on my radar as far as the thing that gets the United States pulled out of foreign affairs, world affairs, like the Bible talks about. Right. I think we're going to burn it down, and so that's a pretty scary thing for us, and the rest of the world will just be dealing with what they deal with at that point, and so, yeah.
All right, good year to come to the prophecy update.
Yeah.